Well, the first homestand of 2026 is in the books, and the Rangers head out on a 10-day road trip with a 7-5 record. Welcome to this week's edition of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I'm Evan Grant.
And Evan, the interesting homestand for the Rangers, swept by the Reds, sweep the Mariners, and a lot of great pitching, not so great offense.
Yeah, we're going to have the same story, John, this year about can you hit in Globe Life Field, and until this offense proves that it can score runs on a consistent basis, we're going to continue with that question. I don't know that anybody's got any definitive answers. I have talked to some folks at the organization who say that through the small sample size, at least going into Wednesday's series finale, they had seen that on balls hit between 95 and higher, they had flown an average of 4 feet further than last year. So their data suggests that it's carrying a little bit further than it was a year ago. I think part of the issue right now, John, is the Rangers have a really good pitching staff, and they've faced some really good pitchers in the first homestand. So maybe once they come back and after they face Paul Skeens and the Pirates, maybe things will settle a little bit more at Globe Life Field.
And we'll talk about the first 12 games here in just a bit, but later in the podcast, we'll speak with Rangers quality control coach Rod Barajas, former catcher with the team, about his role, his relationship with Skip Schumaker, and then we'll close this podcast with the archives in Arlington on a big night for Pudge Rodriguez in 1999, where I thought we might have a major league record.
Well, you got a little antsy on the major league record, John. You were jumping into it too early. Listen, you can reach out to us on X. I'm, as always, at Evan_P_Grant. And John is, as always, at Rangers Blake. And John, before we get started today, I just want to say one thing. On Friday of this week, April 10th, hopefully people will be listening early in the morning on Friday. I will be at the Rodeo Goat in Arlington in the morning, in the early part of the lunch rush, and then in Dallas to wait tables as we try to raise some more money for Mercy Street Sports in Dallas. And as you know, Mercy Street bases a lot of their activities out at the Rangers inner city youth complex in West Dallas. It's part of the area where I call home, and so it's important. They did a great job last year raising some money on a moment's notice. You've made some things happen in terms of some tickets and a Nathan Eovaldi autograph ball that's available for raffle. There's a Michael Young ball autograph. There's a Corey Seager and a Wyatt Langford ball. There is a ticket package and a tour with you in that Nathan Eovaldi package. There's a number of activities that are involved, not just limited to the Rangers, the Stars, the Mavericks, and FC Dallas all contributed. So it's an attempt to just raise some money for underserved kids. The genesis of all this was Jackie Robinson Day a couple of years ago. And this is going to come up right around Jackie Robinson Day, which is April 15th. The Rangers are playing the Dodgers in LA that night, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to have the fundraiser again. Maybe you'll even show up and yell at me some.
I might. I mean, are they serving the Evan Grant burger?
They are serving the Evan Grant burger, and I know you want to know what's on the Evan Grant burger, don't you?
Not really, but why don't you tell us anyway?
Well, the Evan Grant burger is 7 ounces of a patty stuffed with bacon and Gouda cheese, topped by a slice of barbecued brisket, or smoked brisket, as we like to say. The undercarriage is what the folks at Rodeo Goat came up with as French fry potato salad. It's basically potato salad made with their French fries. And then there's, for your health, there's some microgreens, some very delicate microgreens on top of the burger, and something that we call home run aioli. I'm still not sure what's in it, but it's good.
Well, we'll all be looking forward to that this weekend.
Bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. Here comes Jimmy Dale from Baker Brothers Plumbing, AC, and Electrical.
Thanks, Chuck. When your home pitches curveballs, Baker Brothers knocks it out of the park.
Home run, Baker Brothers. Incredible.
As the official home service partner of your Texas Rangers, we're offering $300 off a tank or tankless water heater.
Another winning call. Visit callbakernow.com or dial 214-342-1171 today.
Baker Brothers.
Great service.
But let's talk a little bit about these Rangers. And again, as we talked about at the top of the show, a very interesting homestand, and then getting swept by Cincinnati, and then sweeping the Mariners, who are kind of in free fall at the moment with a 4-9 record. But again, you mentioned it. Rangers got tremendous pitching in this Mariners series. The bullpen, which had been maligned early on in the season, didn't give up a run in 11 innings. The starting pitching, as it's been all season, was really strong. So let's start with the bullpen. What changed over the time? Jacob Junis and Jake Latz, the two Jakes, really put together some pretty good innings.
Well, that's what's changed, right? Is roles. I think that the Rangers decided after Chris Martin and Robert Garcia struggled in the first week that they were going to give some opportunities to other guys. Junis has been lights out. You know, he's throwing a changeup that he really finally got comfortable with last year. He's throwing that a lot more since the second half of last year, and I think that's added to his arsenal, that he's comfortable with the changeup. He's able to throw that and the slider, so he's got multiple pitches working off the fastball, and he's been efficient. He's not a high strikeout guy, but you know, he pitched on back-to-back days, racked up 2 saves on Monday and Tuesday against Seattle, protecting tight leads. Needed only 19 pitches to get through the two outings, so that's impressive. And you know, you look at Jake Latz, and I can't speak highly enough of what he's done. He lost out on the starter's job, the job in the rotation, and came right back and started the second game of the season. No hit Philadelphia for 4 innings. He hasn't allowed a hit yet this year. Batters are 0 for 28 against him through the Seattle series. So he's pitched the equivalent of a no-hitter. And he's shown no disappointment in missing out on the rotation. He's glommed right on to being a high leverage reliever, and I think the Rangers are going to ride that duo for the time being. And that said, look, I think, you know, Cole Winn has been really effective as he continues to move into a higher leverage role. And on Wednesday, we saw Luis Crivello's 2026 debut with 2 impressive innings against Seattle, full of strikes. Crivello had a great second half of spring training. He was the last guy left off of the roster. And I think he's the guy with some stuff and some youth that has the ability to be your surprise guy, the guy that kind of comes from out of nowhere to pick up a higher leverage position in the bullpen. So, and with all that said, Chris Martin had a great 8 pitch inning on Wednesday.
Well, let's look at starting pitching again. Has been great. What's the latest on Jacob deGrom, who had that little knee issue the other night that they sent him for an MRI?
Yeah, as I told Jacob Wednesday morning, you know, if you say that something on your body is in any way sore, we're all going to panic. And he knows that it comes with the territory. The MRI came back clean. He'll throw a bullpen on Friday in LA, and he's scheduled to start on Sunday. He gets an extra day of rest, as do all of the pitchers, because of the off day on Thursday, and the Rangers were going to honor that. So no concern there. I think the big story with the rotation, John, has been, you know, we got a chance to see against Seattle what dimension it is that MacKenzie Gore adds to that rotation. You set him in the number 3 spot, and the Rangers went against what most people think is the best 1-2-3 in the big leagues this week, in Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, and Brian Wu, and they all pitched really well. But deGrom, Eovaldi, and MacKenzie Gore, who pitched 5 innings of 1-hit shutout baseball on Wednesday, simply outpitched them. And I think that was important. You know, we can get into this a little bit if you want, but simply winning a series from Seattle, given the last 3 years and the Rangers having lost 9 consecutive series to them, was important. Sweeping them is all the more reason for encouragement. But I think you come away from this a lot the way you came from winning a series in Houston in early part of 2023. There is a message that goes along with that, and that is the Mariners very well will get themselves right at some point in time. But right now the Rangers are sending a message they have the rotation top to bottom that can compete with them.
Well, let's talk about the offense a little bit. And again, not making any excuses, but the Rangers did face a lot of good pitching on this homestand. Cincinnati's starting pitching and bullpen was outstanding in that series. And then you mentioned the Mariners, but, you know, is it alarming that the Rangers are last in the American League in walks at this point? That was a point of emphasis in spring training, to be more selective at the plate. How alarming is that at this point in the season?
And I mean, I just go back to the quality of pitchers they faced in the first 12 games. You know, you faced 2 of the finalists in the NL Cy Young Award that first weekend in Philadelphia. Trevor Rogers, who was considered a top-tier lefty in Baltimore, and then obviously the pitchers they faced this weekend with Seattle. Wyatt Langford on Wednesday took his first walk. I think if there's been a disappointment there, it's been that Wyatt hasn't taken more walks. I think he has struggled a little bit with getting settled into the number 2 spot and with how pitchers are attacking him. But I think I've seen some better at-bats over the first few days. I guess I'm slow to the draw on all of this. I still think that by and large, their approach has been okay. Not just okay. I think their approach has been good. And I'm not, quote unquote, panicked about this offense the way I was last year. I think that there are some tweaks that the Rangers can make, and I think they've already made one with Ezekiel Duran starting to get more starts at third base over Josh Young, who isn't walking either. I think he has 9 strikeouts to 1 walk. And listen, I don't know that we thought that Jake Berger and Josh Young were going to walk a ton coming into the season because their track record doesn't suggest it. So maybe that was a little bit, you know, spring training mirage. But I do think that the general approach at the plate has been pretty good. And I'll just give you one example. I know people have booed Jock Peterson. I think his at-bats have been high quality. You know, he's worked lots of counts. He's hustled on a couple of big infield hits that factored in winning rallies. He had that home run on Sunday, and I think that was a big relief for him. So I think that, you know, if you're looking at things and the Rangers are looking at process as much as anything, the reason Josh Young is not playing as much right now is I think the Rangers see his process is a little bit out of sync. And I think they feel like Peterson's is, and that his at-bats have continued to improve.
Well, you mentioned at the top about the ballpark and Globe Life Field and how it's going to play. The roof was open for what, 2 games, I guess, out of the 6, right? Or
I think it was open for half of the 6
so,
games.
Yeah, so the roof was open for 3 games of the 6 played on this homestand. It didn't seem to really matter one way or the other. Is that a factor of good pitching, or is the ballpark still playing? Is that big pitcher's park?
Yeah, I mean, I think it still plays as a pitcher's park, and I think the Rangers, with the way they've constructed their rotation, are leaning into that. And I think they've got a better ability now to manufacture a run or 2. They're not going to manufacture 6 runs in a game, but they've got an ability to manufacture a run or 2. You looked on Wednesday, you saw a rally start with an infield single from the bottom of the order, a hustle infield single, a couple more singles, a walk, sacrifice fly, a big fielder's choice, where Brandon Nimmo made something happen, a ground ball to the first baseman, where Seattle may have hurried a little bit to try and get the out at home plate in what was then a 0-0 game, turns into a two-run error. The Rangers add another run in that inning on Corey Seager's sacrifice fly. And those are the kinds of innings we did not see last year from the Texas Rangers offense.
And we may not see the team goes to Los Angeles this weekend to play the defending World Series champions. Then maybe they get to Oakland, to Sacramento, and which is a hitters-friendly ballpark. So hopefully maybe we'll see some results on this road trip.
You'd like to see the results start to add up. Yeah, I thought the results on the first road trip were fine. I think the Rangers averaged 5 runs a game on that first road trip. But they came home, and it certainly looked like last year, which is the reason that everybody, despite the fact that they went 3-3 and they swept Seattle, the fact that it looked like last year with very few hits and very few runs, I think has made everybody a little bit nervous, and I think that's just something the Rangers are going to have to deal with until they're a little bit more efficient at home.
Well, we'll see what happens on a 10-game road trip, and Evan will be heading to the West Coast next week. But before that, our guest on this week's episode is Rod Barajas, as we mentioned. Barajas, a former Major League catcher, played 3 years for the Rangers from 2004 to 2006, and is now in his third stop with Skip Schumaker on a big league staff, and he's the quality control coach for this year's team. And we'll talk to Rod next. Well, we're delighted to have as our guest on this week's edition of Sports Day Rangers, Rod Barajas, who is the Rangers' new quality control coach. Coached in the big leagues prior with Skip Schumaker, both with the Padres and the Marlins. Played 14 seasons in the big leagues as a catcher. Won the World Series with Arizona in 2001. And Ranger fans remember he had a 3-year stint with the ball club, basically as the club's starting catcher from 2004 to 2006, 47 homers, 159 RBIs, and 325 games in that period. And Rod, thanks for joining us today.
Well, excited to be here, and want to see going back down memory lane. Something I don't get to do very often, and really excited to talk about the days here in Texas.
Well, let's start with the present. And you've worked with Skip both on the staffs with the Padres and then in 23-24 with the Marlins, especially that memorable run you guys had to the postseason in 2023. And now you're back on his coaching staff. What does he bring to the Rangers, and we've seen it in spring training. We've seen the enthusiasm. We've seen the way he collaborates so well. If you had to describe him, how would you do it?
He's just an incredible communicator. Like, he's just really open, really honest. The communication that he has with not just the coaching staff, front office, but with the players, it's something that you yearn for as a player. Especially. You want honesty. You want people to let you know kind of where you're at, where you're sitting, what the situation is. Moving forward, where we're going to be at. So, he just jumps in front of everything. There's nothing. You'll never see players, coaches that are in thinking like, "Hey, what's going on right now? Like, what's he thinking? What situation am I in right now?" He's just constantly on top of everything, and he played himself, and he was a grinder himself. A guy who made position changes, and wasn't too sure about himself, and he's gone through the grinder at that aspect of it. So he doesn't want players to ever be away from the field wondering what's going on, what's their situation is. So he's just an incredible communicator, and he's honest, and he's able to get in front of things and make the clubhouse, make the locker room just an incredible place to come to work every single day.
But you're his guy. You have been with him both places he's been. You've been on the same staff. You are the first name that somebody mentioned to me when he was going to get this job that would be joining the staff. And I know, from inauspicious beginnings, because as a minor league manager, you basically forced him to retire one game in the middle of spring training. and we could talk about that story a little bit. But how did you guys bond? Like, what was what caused that bond where you guys are so kind of in tune with one another?
Well, as players, we played against each other, but we never communicated. Might have been a high at home play, but there was zero relationship for us as players. But then, when I was managing in AAA, he came over for his last year as a non-roster invitee. I think he was for the Padres, and that's kind of where the relationship started. I'm the AAA manager, so I'm just kind of hanging around. Whatever anybody needs, I'm there for them. They want ground balls, I hook ground balls. So I wasn't necessarily like in the day-to-day action talking to these guys, like, really, really involved. But Skip was like, even back then, he liked talking, he liked getting people's feedback. And so we kind of built a little relationship there. So I managed him a couple times in split squad games in spring training. And, so there was a small relationship I think that was 2016, the year it was. So we had a small little relationship that we started, and then we got in the same coaching staff together. And that's kind of where the relationship bonded. We stood next to each other pretty much every home game. We had our two spots, and we sat there and we talked the game. That's all it was. We talked game, we talked clubhouses, we talked situations. We agreed, we disagreed, and it was cool. Like there was no issues. I didn't feel like he wanted me to agree with everything that he thought, and vice versa. So I think that's where it started. Because we did disagree and we did have different views, and we were okay. Like talking them out, talking through them. And sometimes we didn't end up agreeing on one way of doing it. Maybe I thought my way and he thought his way, but most of the times, it just kind of opened each other's eyes. So the organic conversations that we had on a daily basis, those 3 years that we were together in San Diego, it just kind of built that relationship. We talked, when Andy Green got let go in San Diego and I became the interim manager for those 7 days or whatever it was, the first call I made was to Skip. I called Skip up, and he was driving down, and we sat there and we talked through the media. We talked about, what to say and how to handle the clubhouse. And so he was my first call when I basically became a manager for that interim basis. So our just relationship is just honesty. We have each other's back, and that's probably the most impressive thing with Skip is like he really respects his coaches, and he really fights for them, and he's really in your corner, and he is all the time. So that's how it started. And once he got the Miami job, I waited 3 or 4 days to congratulate him. I don't want him to feel like I was calling him, hey, can I get a job? But I did value his friendship. I did value our time together. So I gave him a text, congratulations, you're going to kill it. And he texted me back saying, I'll call you in a little bit. So, and that's kind of where it all started.
This is the thing in baseball, like when you find your people that you can talk with, and it's not just like where everybody's rubber stamping one another, just agreeing with everybody's opinion, but when you can argue, just talk ball and argue, and both people respect the other's opinions, and you can talk freely. That's what makes a really special baseball relationship. And that's why, guys value that kind of stuff in the game. But he did walk off the field basically after one at bat during spring training, and that was the end for him. So what's your recollection of that day? Because he's brought it up on more than one occasion.
Yeah. So it's a split squad game, and the bench coach is at home. Is Mark McGuire? I think he had family issues going on at home. So usually the bench coach will take the split squads game, but since Mac was at home, Andy took one game, and the AAA manager is like, all right, you got the second game. So and then they write up a little plan for you. Okay, this guy's going 5 innings. This guy's going, it's 3 at bats, whatever it is, and you kind of you follow that protocol. And if there's an opportunity for an extra at bat, you will go up to a player and say, hey, you should be done, but if you want one more at bat, I'll give it to you. If you want another one, if you want to play another inning on defense, you can have it. So that kind of came up with Skip. I think he'd reached his 3 at bat quota, and he finished his 5-6 innings on defense or whatever it was, and he came back in the dugout. I'm like, hey, you're done for the day unless you want this one last at bat. If you want this one last at bat, you can have it. And I didn't know he was thinking this, but in his mind, he told me that he's like, I'll take this one more at bat. But if I roll over to second base facing this single A arm that's on the mound right now, then I'm retired. I'm done. Sure enough, when he goes out there, he takes the at bat, rolls over to second base, and I'm assuming he made the decision right there that, no mas, this is going to be it. So me giving him the option of getting that one more at bat and him already making that decision in his mind kind of set him up for his retirement. So he got that at bat. I think he went back to the field and he called Andy Green and said, "I'm done."
I mean, you were a catcher for a long time in the big leagues, but Brett Hayes handles the bulk of the catching responsibility. I know when we were in Baltimore last week, you guys had a day with some early work, and you were obviously both on the field out there. And Luis Uredo, who you worked with in Miami, is the bench coach. Another guy you threw under the bus when you got him thrown out in a game one time, but we can talk about that too. But you are titled the quality control coach. So what is your role? What do you feel like your role is on a day-to-day basis?
I just feel like I'm an extra set of eyes for all departments. I look at the scouting reports, and I'm in the meetings for the pitchers meetings. I'm in the meetings for the starters meetings. I'm in the advanced meeting for the hitters meeting. So I'm involved in every single meeting. I'm just kind of listening and gathering information. And then what I feel like I do really well is in game, seeing things in game. Where whether it's pitch tipping, whether it's their pitchers times of the plate, or I'm seeing they might be moving a little early, or just something here or there that some people sometimes in live action you can miss it, but I just feel like my eyes are always wandering throughout the field, so I'm able to be there to help out with decisions that are made in the game. I sit next to Skip, and he wants me to sit next to him, and he just loves bouncing questions off of me, and and it's the same thing in the dugout. We agree sometimes. It's not always I'm not always there to say yes, Skip, yes, sir, whatever you want, sir. But we go back and forth, and I'm just another set of ears for him to bounce things off. So, but I just basically see everything, and I'm watching the game, and I'm watching what's going on, and I'm giving, writing down notes. So if I see something with our pitchers, whether they're delivering on the same time and they're falling into patterns, and something we can relate to the pitching coach. So during the game, we don't get taken advantage of. Not just wait until the next day to address the issue, but we don't want to ever get caught with our pants down during the game. So if I can see something that's going on in that moment, I'd like to get to the bottom of it and fix it right then and there.
And that takes a special staff. Everybody's got to have ability to let multiple voices speak and be heard. And I think that's something that Skip wants on his staff. I want to move over to 04 for a little bit. Let's just set this up, right? You come in here in 04 from Arizona. You had been with Buck Showalter a little bit in Arizona. The Rangers had let Pudge Rodriguez go after the 02 season. He wins a World Series in Miami in 03. Meanwhile, the Rangers and Einar Diaz don't have a great year behind the plate. And the 24 season is the first without Alex Rodriguez. And the whole story going into spring training that year was, I think Alex had made a comment about didn't want to be part of 24 kids and me. I know there was talk about that. How did that help galvanize that team?
Well, I just felt like we were still a lot of younger players that had something to prove. We had some great veterans mixed in with Kenny Rogers and, those type of guys, but we were just we were younger players, but we were younger players who were hungry, we didn't want to be written off as just, a development squad. So, it definitely did, it did light something, for myself and for some of the other guys. We didn't want to be the doormat for all these other organizations, feeling that they could come in and just, take a series every time, or we go into their place and take a series. But because we were young and we were inexperienced, that's not what it was about. We were, we thought we could do something special that year. We thought we had the talent to do something special. A few things had to click, and one of the things that really needed to click was that bullpen, and that bullpen was outstanding, which kept us in every single game. It kept our explosive offense that we had. Also gave us a chance to make those comebacks later on in the game. So we at no point did we feel like we weren't a playoff contending team. So we went into it with that kind of intent of, hey, we're going to make a push for this, and we're going to make ourselves relevant that year. And, we came really close, but I think after that year, I had Mike Scioscia came up to me the next year, and he told me, he's like, you guys were special. You guys were fun last year to watch. So we definitely opened some eyes, and I think it was big for not just the organization, but for us us younger players at the time to put ourselves on the radar and say, hey, we're here.
Now, Evan, if you remember, and Rod, I'm sure probably doesn't remember, Rangers only had 2 guys that won 10 games that year. Kenny won 18, and Ryan Drees won 14. But it was the bullpen. Francisco Cordero might have had arguably the best year ever by a Ranger reliever. He had 49 saves. But then you had Carlos Almanzar, you had Brian Schaus, you had Ron Mayhay, and you had Frank Francisco. And Cordero had a great season. So what do you remember about him that year? And it seems like when you guys were closing a game, it was pretty automatic.
Well, he was calm. He was built for that role. Big human being, big strong man, and he goes out there intimidating. He fits that closer mold, and it wasn't just the looks. It was a mindset also. He was up there. He was going to attack. He knew he had an explosive fastball. He knew he had a nasty slider, and there was no doubt in his mind that he wasn't going to go out there and finish the game. And there was no doubt in the mind of our team. When you have 24 other guys knowing that, okay, this is our guy and he's going to get the job done, it just lifts you even higher. So, he was just built for that role. His personality was infectious. Everybody absolutely loved him in the clubhouse. Personality-wise, he was just as good as anybody else. And, we just knew the competitor that he was. And, when you have guys who are 100% bought in and want to do it so bad, as a team, you don't want to let him down. Defensively, calling the game, even offensively. If something does happen and they tie the game up in the 9th, we want to win the game for him. So, we all had his back. And, I got to see him, I think it was a couple of years ago. He's working for the MLB now. So I got to see him and gave him a big hug. And it's the same guy, the big teddy bear. And, but he was just, his year is what made it possible for us to fight for something there late in September.
He had some save opportunities in 2002 and 2003, but 2004 was really the first time he got an opportunity to hold on to the role, and he ran with it. Ended up with over 40 saves, was absolutely dominant. The unfortunate part is things were going so well for that bullpen until we get to a series in Oakland in September. And we had one of the all-time great headlines in the Dallas Morning News because we get that game in Oakland on, I think it was September 13th. Don't even remember how the circumstances happened, but we end up with a brawl between the Rangers bullpen and Oakland fans. Frankie Francisco, who also really emerged that year, ends up throwing a chair into the stands, and the headline in the paper that day ended up being "When the Seat Hits the Fan," which was a great headline. But it also really had an impact on y'all's season. Rod, I that night still is, there's so much about that night that's like, embedded in my mind, from trying to get answers from Buck to trying to talk to Mark Connor about stuff, just things that never really seemed clear. Like, what was your view of everything that took place there?
Well, you can't see from the dugouts in Oakland. When I'm sitting in the dugout, I just start seeing people run that direction. And once I see everybody else run that direction, I'm going that way also. And by that time, it was just kind of a melee. These are your teammates. These are the guys this is your family, that you're seeing in this altercation. And, it's hard for people to stay calm when you feel like your family's being attacked. We went down there, though. I think the guys that ran down from the bench were trying to pull people out of the stands, trying to keep everything separated, trying to keep the peace. But, I wasn't in the bullpen when that happened, and I don't know I've heard some things, but I don't know how nasty it was. But I'm sure if it was as nasty as what I heard it was, and I'm not saying I understand, but it's protecting one of your own. It's still a crazy scenario. It's crazy that it happened. There's a lot of people that are at fault. I'm not saying that it's all the fans' fault. We have to show some restraint also, and understand that's exactly what they're looking for. That's the response they want to get out of the players. They want them to interact with them. They want them to do something dumb so they can be on the news and they can they can be in the spotlight, get their 5 minutes, whatever you want to say. But it was just it was tough for us. After it happened, put us in a really bad spot, and terrible for Frankie. Frankie, another guy that's a huge teddy bear. He's a big, intimidating looking man on the mound, but he is the nicest, sweetest man in the world. I'm shocked that Frankie was the one that did that, because that's not the person that I knew. So, for him to do that, it had been pretty bad. But, like I said, I'm not here going to say, he did the right thing, but, that just completely derailed our season.
Both Frankie and Almanzar got suspended, right, Evan? And
and Doug Brocail as well for a shorter period.
Brocail, that's right. So it kind of derailed the way Buck could use the bullpen there, and
it really hindered the bullpen the last couple of weeks. Though the Rangers got within 2 games, with 10 to play. Great moment. Your former teammate in Arizona, David DeLucci, has that slide at home for a walk-off win. I think that was against Oakland too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, got it within 2 at 10 to play. And Evan, you called that one of your 10 greatest moments at the old ballpark in 2019 when you did your summary.
Yeah, for a regular season moment, and for how surprising that team was, it was a great moment. It really was. And I don't know that we'll ever get the full story of what transpired that night. There was certainly a lot of talk about fans who were saying stuff about players' families and their parents and things like that. The unfortunate part, I think, is that that's what Frank Francisco's 10-year major league career gets remembered as. Is he was a guy who had some very good years with the Rangers.
Well, we like to remember we traded him for Mike Napoli, though. So, because that helped us go to the World Series in 2011.
It always gets back to a catcher. All right, Rod, very quickly before we let you go, there's a great John Boy video out there breaking down an ejection when you were on the Marlins staff, where apparently Skip turned into an owl because somebody was ejected in y'all's dugout and the umpires didn't know who. And why don't you just take it from there? What happened?
So I forgot. I don't know if it was a pitch call or what it was, but there was argument. And we've been arguing for a while. I think it was one of those days where the umpire was having a rough day and he was kind of getting it from both sides. But
that was the olden days before there was challenges.
Before there was challenges, yeah. So I think our dugout is finally had enough and lived over a call, and so the whole dugout erupts, and the umpire turns over, says, "No more, that's enough. No more screaming, no more." So he turns back around, and then somebody yelled. I don't know who it was. Somebody gave one last yell, and he's like, "You're out of here." He turned right, he threw somebody out. He waved that "you're gone," and then that's when Skip turned into an owl. He's like, "Who? Who are you talking about? Who's gone?" Nobody said anything. And he's like, "I don't know. Just somebody's got to go." He's like, "What do you mean somebody's got to go? I've never heard that. You're just throwing somebody out. Somebody has to leave." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Who?" He kept saying, who, over and over again. So, and us coaches, I'm laughing. I'm dying laughing in the dugout at this point. Because if there's a video, you can see my head's down and I'm laughing and I'm pointing. We're pointing at each other, trying to figure out who's going to go.
The greatest part of the video is everybody in the dugout is pointing at different guys. It's hysterical.
Yeah, so we're all trying to figure out who's the one that should go. I don't know who it was that yelled, that made that last yell. People say my voice carries. Maybe I said something, but I thought I said it under my breath, but I actually said it out loud. But the third base umpire came down. He's like, "Yeah, Skip, somebody's got to go." He's like, "Who's got to go? I don't understand this. This is incredible. I've never heard of this." So he's in there and he's pleading this case. And then the Dan Iassonio was the third base umpire. He's like, "It's got to be that guy. It's got to be your bench coach. Then he's got to go." He's like, "Why? He didn't say anything." He's like, "I saw him walking down, clapping in the dugout. So he's the one that's got to go." So Pipe goes out there and he starts talking to the umpire. He's like, "All right, that's fine. I guess I got to go." So, Luis Ureta got ejected because somebody who yelled in the dugout. It might not been me. I don't know. But yeah, he got sent to the showers that game.
It's a great video. You've got to watch it on John
That's
Boy if you can find it. I may post it on our website before it's over with. But the great line is Skip Schumaker turns into an owl, and Skip is just going, "Who? So it's a great video. Rod, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Rod.
I really enjoyed covering you as a player, glad to have you back on the staff, and it's clear that you've got a lot of energy and passion already for this club. So thanks for joining us today, and I'll come ask you some questions at some point in time later in the week.
I'm sure you will. All right, thanks
All right,
a lot,
thanks
guys.
so much. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me on.
Well, thanks to Rod Barajas for that conversation. Brought back some memories about the 2004 Rangers, one of Evan's favorite teams. But now let's move on to the archives in Arlington. And we're going to talk about a moment that will have happened when this podcast is running. April 13th, 1999. We are playing in Seattle. It is the old Kingdome at the time. They would later move, I believe that season, maybe the next season, into the current ballpark.
I believe they moved mid-season. That's the first time.
Yes,
Yeah.
99. I think you're right, because the All-Star game was up there in 2001. Yes, that's correct. Anyway, we thought, I thought we were in for an historic night. I thought Sonny Jim Bottomley may be in jeopardy that night, his record for RBIs in a game, when Pudge Rodriguez drove in 9 runs in the first 3 innings of that game against the Mariners in a 15-6 win for the Rangers. He had a 3-run home run off the immortal Ken Cloud in the first inning, who was starting for Seattle. In the second inning, he had a 2-run single off Cloud. And then in the third inning, he came to the plate again, hit a grand slam off Max Suzuki, making the score 13-0 and giving him 9 RBIs in the first 3 innings of this game. And I'm sitting there going, okay, he's on a roll here. He's easily gonna get 2 or 3 more. Bottomley's record, it was 12 at the time, and but it was not to be. He had a force out in the 5th, and then a single in the 7th, and then he came out for Greg Zahn as the Rangers won that game 15-6, and 99 was Pudge's only 100 RBI season, Evan. He had 113 that year en route to winning the MVP award. But I don't believe you were at that game. But
I believe I was at a wedding in New York City. I believe I was at the at a wedding of a sports media power couple, Judy Batista and Anthony McCarron. Judy, obviously, of the NFL Network, and Anthony, who is with SNY now. And I seem to remember that night getting back to my hotel, because obviously we didn't have internet on our phones at that point in time, but I got back to my hotel and checked the internet and found out that Pudge had 9 RBIs, and I was like, great, I'm going to get fired for not being at this game. But I know Jerry Fraley had handled it very well. Jerry and Pudge were very close.
they were tight. Yeah, they were tight.
But I think I think that all worked out. I guess my historic moments in Seattle go back to the end of the '98 season, John, when Scarborough Green stole 5 bases in the final game of the year, and it so left an impression on me that half the time when I'm talking about prospect Caden Scarborough, I still call him Scarborough Green. So it left an impression on me.
Well, the Kingdome was not a favorable place for the Rangers much over the years going back. But on that night in 1999, and it kind of foretold what the season that Pudge would have, just an amazing season, winning the MVP award despite the controversy that year when 2 writers left Pedro Martinez completely off their ballot. And he actually had more first-place votes than Pudge did, 8-7. But
and if you recall, John, I did not actually vote for Pudge #1 that year. I voted for Rafael Palmeiro. And the controversy on Rafi and why he was not the stronger candidate was because he was basically a DH, and Pudge was
despite
catching.
winning a Gold Glove that year, he played
did win a
30
Gold Glove
games at first base.
Yeah. I thought the addition of Palmeiro to the lineup had changed so much for the Rangers. but certainly you couldn't argue with Pudge's numbers or what he had done from the catching position. And when you look back at that year, the number of games played, what he did both, behind the plate, at the plate, and I think, didn't he steal 20 bases that year?
Yes, yeah.
So he was like a 20-20 catcher,
right.
yeah.
Yes, he was, yeah.
So it is a historic season for a catcher, and just one of the many instances where I got the voting for the MVP wrong.
But the other thing, if you remember, Evan, the Rangers Player of the Year award went to Rafael Palmeiro. The local writers voted for Rafi because he did. He had a monster year. I mean, that club had Juan Gonzalez, who was coming off 2 MVPs in 3 years, Pudge, and Rafi in the middle of that lineup, not to mention the other guys. And it was an amazing bit of offense, and the pitching was good, too, that year. And that was a year, and I think we've talked about this, I thought we had a real chance to beat the Yankees. That may have been one of my more disappointing postseasons. We had Aaron Seeley, and we had Rick Helling, and we just couldn't get over the hump.
Well, certainly to get swept in back-to-back AL Division Series by the Yankees, and with the Yankees extending their postseason winning streak against the Rangers to 9 games at that point, was certainly a whole lot of frustration on how that year ended. And we'll get into that at some point in time, basically, on how that led to the remake of the club, the trade of Juan Gonzalez, for Gabe Kapler and Francisco Cordero.
Justin Thompson was the key of that deal, and it never quite worked out. But that's the way it goes. But on that night in April, I thought I was in for a record-setting night, and still 9 RBIs is still the club record for RBIs in a game. So it was a good night nonetheless. And Pudge went on to drive in for his career over 1,300 runs in his Hall of Fame career. So with that, we thank you for joining this week's episode of Sports Day Rangers.
And you can always follow us. John is at Ranger Blake on the X, and I am at Evan_P_Grant. These clips are also available on Instagram from some of the more memorable moments of the show. So until next week.
And Evan will be heading out to the West Coast, and we'll talk to you all next week.